Today's lesson is over combining like terms. So I am going to need you to make this journal entry into your math notebooks. Make sure to put it into your table of contents, and then again on your next open page, your notes page today. It should look. Let me show you like a blank version of this. Okay, so this is a new notes page that I was trying. It's called Doodle Notes. So it's to help some of the people who blah, 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 sorry, use the left part of their brain, um, help them take math notes. So it's shown that the more you like, if you're doodling while you're taking notes and things like that, that you're more likely to remember. For me, I struggled with this, you guys. So the coloring and all that stuff was difficult for me because I do not like to doodle. I do not have an ounce of creativity in my body. So this was a struggle for me, coloring and all that stuff, when I just wanted to power through it and solve all the equations and just get it done. The coloring added on extra time for me. But if you're a person who likes to color and likes to draw and doodle and things like this should be right up your alley. So again, you'll have the blank version of this. If you want to color it, feel free. I'm going to talk to you about why I colored things certain colors and how to make this work for combining like terms. So at first, let's talk about the vocabulary words. We already have learned all of these words, so this should sound familiar. So these arrows were pointing to different parts, and I just went ahead and filled in the arrows with their vocabulary terms first. So this arrow right here that's pointing to the 3, this 3 is called a coefficient. So make sure you go ahead and write that word coefficient that's pointing to the 3. Below that, we have another arrow, but this arrow is pointing to the 3 and the x squared. So both of those combined, that's called a term. Okay, so this is a term. We got x as a second term, 2 is a third term, and then over here we got this 4x, that's a fourth term. So this expression has 4 terms, but just you have to know that this one right here is called a term. This arrow is pointing to the x. X is called a variable. This arrow here is pointing to the 2. Since the 2 has no variable behind it, this is called a constant. Okay, so if it's just a number, it's called a constant. If it's just a letter, it's called a variable. Okay, and then we have another arrow over here that's pointing to the 4. This is another example of a coefficient. Okay, so then I just colored those all yellow just so they would stand out. However, inside here, your guys' letters and numbers are blank. And you can see I colored mine. I got the 3x squared in blue, the minus x, so I kept the operation with the term. Okay, so for this one, I have that minus x. The minus sign, the subtraction sign, and that x go together. So that's why I colored both of them in that pinkish color. Okay, and then you could see that I also colored this minus 4x in the same color. The reason why I did that is because they have the same variable. So these are like terms. So if it had a like term, I colored the like term in the same color. So 3x squared doesn't have any like terms because it has an x, but the exponent is 2. None of these have an exponent of 2, so they're not the same. Okay, so it's the only one of its kind. So that's why it gets its own blue color. So then I got the x. Over here, I have an x as well, so that got colored in pink. And then I only have one constant, is the plus 2, so that got its own color. Before we move on to the next section, I also want to talk about how I'm going to pick a different color here. Let's go with this pink. This x right here. When it says minus x, we have to think about how many is this. So this is only 1x. So there's like an imaginary 1 right here. Lots of people get confused because there's no number there, okay, but it does represent at least one. Okay, over here we know that there's 4 because it has a 4 in front of the x, but over here there was no number, and if it helps you, put a 1 there. Okay, so that way when I go to combine these later, I know that I'm supposed to have minus 1x and minus 4x. Okay. So that's a review of the vocabulary part. So let's go down to the notes. And you guys have already been practicing combining like terms. I just thought it would be easier maybe if you had a little bit of practice, the notes would make a little bit more sense. So I started with the practice first. Hopefully all of this sounds familiar. It's just now you're taking notes on it. So here's my little doodle. Okay, I struggled with it. Again, I'm not a doodler. You can make yours look however you would like, but just be sure that you get these notes done before you leave today. So here are the notes on combining like terms. I'm going to make this just a tiny bit smaller so that way we can see the whole screen at once. And this bottom part. Okay, so we're going to focus on this bottom part here. Like terms, we just talked about this above. Like terms have to have the same variable and the same exponent. Okay, so if you look in this blender here, I have an n squared, but I also have an n. Okay, those are not the same thing. Okay, n squared, you can see I colored in its own color. It doesn't match anything. So because the variable and the exponents have to be the same. So I got n squared, which is different from just n. Okay, and then I also want to talk about though, so you can see I have an n, but over here is an n as well. Still different because this has an m attached to it. So this is mn, which is different. So these two are being multiplied together. This is just an n by itself. Okay, so what I want you to do right now is maybe pause your video and go ahead and color all the terms that are the same in the same color. Okay, so I had 2, which is a constant, and I colored it orange. Here's an 8, that's a constant, so I colored the 8 orange as well. -6 is a constant, so I colored that orange as well. Other like terms, 2m is in a green, a darker green. Here's another m, okay, so -35m. The variables match, so it gets the same color. And then down here, I found an m as well, so that gets colored the same. But remember, this is like 1m, so it's like having one of them, okay? So go ahead and do that, and then play your video when you're finished with that. So you're just matching, figuring out which variables are matching. Okay, now when you're solving these expressions, well, not really solving them, but combining like terms, they always say that you're going to add the like terms. So when you're thinking about this, it's like you're adding them, but if it says, I'm going to back up and just show you an example. I'm sorry. Okay, so here's your to-do list. Add invisible plus signs. I'm going to show you that in just a second. Add invisible ones as your coefficients. So they're saying that if you have just a variable, put a 1 in front of it. Okay, put a 1 in front of it. So that way you know that there's one of them. Okay, then you can go ahead and color any like terms that are matching with the same patterns or colors. So you could see in my try it section, okay, down here I had a 3y, so I colored it green. I also put a box around it. I like using boxes instead of coloring. It's just a little bit faster, so that's why I like it. But I put a box around it in the same color. Okay, so then I went through and looked for anything else that had a y, and I found that the 6y had the same variable, so I put a box around it, but remember that you also need to have that operation boxed in with it. So then I knew that I was going to be able to combine 3y and -6y. So then I kept continuing to go, and I had -1x, so I put that 1 in front of it. Your guys's doesn't have that 1, it just has -x. I put that 1 there to remind me that there's 1x. Okay, and then I went through and I looked for any others that just had that x, and there weren't any. So this guy didn't have a match. He's single and ready to mingle. Then I already had 6y colored in, so now I went and I saw that I had -1. This is a constant. Okay, so it doesn't have any variables, but I can match it up with other things that don't have any variables. So I'm looking and I see that this 4 right here, this +4, is a constant as well. Okay, so those match. This is just like saying -1 plus 4. Okay, we can combine those. We've already done that. So those are going to get combined later on. And then I had plus 12xy. Okay, so then I colored that in orange. I went and saw, I don't know why this is not showing up here, but I did color this in orange. It's just kind of faded out here. The plus 1xy. So these two are going to be able to combine together. So there's lots of things that we're going to combine here. So one thing before I start combining that I want you to know is that to write an expression in standard form, order terms so that the exponents decrease from left to right. So your exponents, if you had something to the third power, it would go from the third power, then anything to the second power, then anything to the first power. So your exponents need to be in order from biggest to smallest, and then your constants are going to be at the end, and variables should be in alphabetical order. And so when I do these, you can see that my 3y, which was in green, came first, but then when I simplified, I didn't put that first. I put the x. That's because I had to put them in alphabetical order. So I go through this in alphabetical order. X comes before y, so I started with this guy. Nothing matches this guy, so it's just going to stay the same. Okay, so -1x, I'm still only going to have -1x, so I just rewrote that part. Okay, then comes y, so then I combined my y's, which were matched already for me. I already did that part, and they're in green. So I have 3y plus -6y. So 3y plus -6y can also be thought of as 3 minus 6. And I know 3 minus 6 equals -3, so I write down minus 3y. Okay, so that came next. Then I had the double variable. So I'm looking at my orange pieces. I had a positive 12xy plus 1xy. So 12 plus 1 equals 13. It's positive, so I put plus 13xy. And then last we write our constants. So with my constants, I had -1 plus a positive 4. -1 and positive 4, they combine to make positive 3. So at the very end of this should be your final answer. -x minus 3y plus 13xy plus 3. All right, another one together for your notes. Here, number 2, I went through. I started with this first one that's in like maroonish purple here. For AB, I went and colored in anything else that had an AB. So you can look at the very last part here. That is a -1. The 1 isn't on your paper, so you might want to write that in. But this is equivalent to -1 AB. So they're both in maroon. So I know I'm going to have to combine those. Okay, then I went through and I saw this a squared. So here's an exponent. Okay, and again, it just says -a squared. So put a 1 in front of it so that you know there's at least one negative. Okay, I'm looking for any other a squares. Here they are. So they're both colored in green. Okay, next I see, let me pick an orange color, and the letter A. Okay, so here I have 3 A's, and then I'm looking for other A's, but I don't see any, so that's my only A. Okay, last one. Here we have a -B. Okay, get that -1 written in there so you know that you're going to have -1. And then over here, I have negative 2b. So those are the same variable. So I color them both in that kind of turquoise color there. Okay, so now we have to combine our like terms. I'm starting in alphabetical order, okay? And then exponents need to go in decreasing order. So a comes first, and then I need the highest exponent first. So I'm first starting with this negative 1a squared plus a squared. However, I know that a negative 1 and a positive 1, they're just going to cancel out, okay? So they're going to cancel one another out. I don't need to rewrite it. Okay, after a squared, I did work with the a's. Okay, I only had 3a. There's nothing to combine it with, so I just rewrote it down here, 3a. After a comes the letter b, so now I'm looking for my b's, okay, which was right here. I have negative 1b and negative 2b, so I'm combining those, add those together. Negative 1 plus negative 2 equals negative 3. So I'm going to write down minus 3b. Okay, so far you should have negative 3a minus 3b. Okay, and then the only thing that we have left are these ones with the two variables. So I have I have positive 4ab, and then minus or add a negative 1ab. So if I'm looking at this, 4 plus negative 1 equals positive 3. So I'm putting plus 3, and then the variables were a and b. Okay, and then this is in simplest form. You can't combine them anymore. I know it looks like you should be able to because this has an a and this has an a, but they're different because this only has an a. This one has an a and a b. Okay, so you cannot combine those. They're separate things. So go ahead. That's it for the notes. Make sure that you have everything written down that I have written down. If you need to go back and listen to any parts, you may. But I hope that that sounded super familiar. You shouldn't be too confused because we've already done all of this stuff. These are just your notes to use when you have a test or something like that. So if you have any questions, though, please stop your video, ask questions. Make sure that you are understanding this, okay? But once this is taped into your math journal, then you're going to grab this sheet. It only has 4 examples on it, and you're going to complete these 4 examples. Actually, let's just go with numbers 1 and 2. You just need to do numbers 1 and 2. I'm actually going to only have examples 1 and 2 available for you, so you won't even have the options to do 3 and 4 on your paper. So just work on numbers 1 and 2, combine the like terms. You can doodle color. If the coloring helps you to match the variables and exponents, do that. If you're like me and you think just coloring just takes up time, then you don't have to color, but do put at least put circles around things that are matching, so that way you know that those would go together. And then here I have these constants. These are all constants, so all the blue circles would be combined, and then the black circles can be combined. So do something that shows that you've matched your variables, but it just doesn't always have to be coloring, okay? Once this is done, make sure that this does get turned in before the end of the class period. And then if you need something extra to do, go back to Google Classroom and see what else is on the list for you to complete for the day. Thanks so much. See you next time.